Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Hello and welcome to the regular 11 o'clock session with the Tibetan Buddhist Society, Canberra. This morning, I'm going to take some questions, and here with me is Peter Radcliffe on my left, and I'm visiting Peter here in Middleton, down in South Australia. I've been coming down here to do some teaching with Peter for many years. Peter has been teaching meditation and he's been long Dharma student. So after a long break due to COVID, I finally managed to come down here. So we are doing this session from here as a question and answer. So thank you everybody joining on Zoom, YouTube, and Facebook. We'll first do the refuge and four immeasurable prayers before we begin the question and answer. Thank you, everybody. May all beings have happiness and cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May they never part from happiness and sadness of suffering. May they dwell in equanimity, free from attachment, aversion to those near and far. May all beings have happiness and cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May they never part from the happiness and sadness of suffering. May they dwell in equanimity, free from attachment, aversion to those near and far. And the cause of happiness, may they be free from suffering. And the cause of suffering, may they never from the happiness that knows of suffering. May they free from God into the intellect and brother was the John of the Thank you, everyone. So we have Peter, who will be doing many of the questions here, but any of you on the Zoom wish to type one or two questions, please feel free to do so in the chat box. If time allows, we will try to do that as well. Thank you. And hello, everyone. Thanks for the invite onto this Zoom call. So it's been wonderful to have Rinpoche here, and we had a lovely time last night with an event. Rinpoche was inspiring us to have more faith. And I've got a large list of questions, and one of those is, inspired from last night. It was wonderful to see Rinpoche talking. And as students, we gain insight and sort of these light bulb moments or aha moments from many different areas. One of them is in our meditation, we might realize something. Another is like last night when we're listening to a teacher. Another is maybe when we're just walking out in nature or, working with kids or something like that. So my question is to you, Rinpoche, is some of the biggest moments of, I guess, realization in your life, when you think back on your life, did they come through extended meditation or through working with students, or indeed, through interaction with your beloved teacher, His Holiness Choedak Rinpoche? And then I know that Rosemary has asked perhaps if, in addition to that, you could maybe talk about Choedak Rinpoche a little bit more. So that's the question, is where in your experience has some of the biggest realizations? Well, this is an assumption that I have biggest experience. It's not a question. There's no question about realization. I have them, is it? Just question: when did you have them? Yes. I firstly wouldn't say that I have some big realizations, but a little bit. There were kind of an accumulation of small insights. They tend to boost one another. My biggest inspiration has been by living in Lumbini, because when I was a student of His Eminence Choedak Rinpoche, who has barely just begun to put up the first wall of the building, but he himself was renting a place, and then he has sold all his valuables that he brought from Tibet, who knows, from many generations. He sold them all and then turned them into money, and then bought bricks and cement and sand. And we were only about 10 or 12 monks helping to build, but all the building was done by the local people. Mm-hmm. And so every now and then I get to go to sit next to on the place where Buddha was born, big tree with a nice, cool place to sit. That's the coolest place. Otherwise, Lumbini is so hot. And every time I sit, this is where Buddha was born. And always in winter, there's hundreds of pilgrims coming from all over the world. Mm-hmm. I used to feel lots of aha realizations about the Buddha. And I become so much, grateful that I could live there and see a brand new monastery being built at a place that was very important, but now very desolate. So what a great sort of resurgence of Dharma might be, and by the vision of Choedak Rinpoche. So of course, I saw him as a living Buddha, but I was even more connected to the Buddha. And so life of Buddha has inspired me most of the time. And so when someone like His Eminence Choedak Rinpoche is living and doing the work, and he, instead of trying anywhere in India, he deliberately returned back to Nepal and built a monastery there. And he thought that the birthplace of Buddha is one of the four main places. And then, of course, when I had the privilege to do the 3-year retreat at that very place, then, of course, some of the biggest, I would say, joy and quality of meditation were in our 3-year retreat. my life wouldn't be the same as it is now if I haven't had those experiences. And if I haven't had Choedak teaching, which is my teacher, it would never happen. And then, of course, I after coming to the West, then when Choedak teaching, which was continuing, we built another new monastery, Lumbini, and I was still keeping in contact, but I had no idea how I'm going to repay his kindness or do that. But when I keep going back on pilgrimage, then we see him, and then I'm starting to teach a little bit casually, but more doing academic work. But more I was doing academic work, the more demand came for people to teach. And so after doing that, then really I need to bring his seminars to Australia to see, or maybe he will endorse, maybe he won't. At least he need to see. So, and then he came in 1996. And so he not only came, but he came with full crew of 12 monks and nuns with him. and he did many ritual ceremony without me even asking, because I asked him some teachings, but he did this four fire pujas on one day at the Birigai retreat, and he said he blessed me and he endorsed my work.
Wow.
And then he kick-started the Ramthang Buddhist College, and so we started teaching the 10-day karma abiding, 4 times a year teaching the karma abiding. So since then we haven't really stopped. We have just kept on doing that. So I think I suppose how the influence of the Buddha has come down through unbroken lineage with the likes of your own teacher, and then try to see how insignificant person like me can also do a little bit that is quite unbelievable, really, that I could be doing that, is because of the greatness of the qualities of the Triple Gem. So the more I recollect the qualities of Triple Gem, I have more insane realizations of indescribable, really. So I think if your faith in the Dharma is strong, then no matter what setbacks of real life happen, they are even more ahas. So I wouldn't give so much to some kind of esoteric realizations, but really total conviction and what you call irreversible faith in the Dharma, and how panacea it is when you apply it. And then you can definitely see the truth of sufferings you can see them suffering, and you never complain sufferings, because they are the nature of existence. You never complain the water being wet, do you? Well, like that. But most people do, water being wet. That's because they haven't opened their eyes. Water has always been wet. So for me to accept those noble truths and not complain, anybody, whatever they do, whatever horrendous things people do, still that's the nature of existence. And so you have to show compassion. If they don't cope with it, they react. That is the biggest aha. So I think we need to be realistic. Seeing the truth of the teachings in a when you listen is one thing, but then you're contemplating all the time, and then you realize. Then the likes of my teacher, who really, is relatively quite high important Lama in Sakya tradition. The Choedak teaching is he's the 25th. There have been other 24 Choedak teaching, but none has reached the height of being revered as head of, not only by Sakya Trinzen, but even being the preceptor, root guru to His Holiness Dalai Lama, is unprecedented. So for me to having had that karma and the fortune to be his assistant and disciple, and then being taught by him to do the 3-year retreat, it has to have a certain meaning that I should honor and always rejoice that. And it wasn't the Buddha, none of this would happen. So it's very good to go to always revere the Buddha and his infinite qualities. And that's what makes makes us to have this fellowship among all the fellowship of you.
All right, thank you. My next question, before I do it, I've got a little dog that wants to be part of the meeting. I'm wondering if you could just go outside and open the gate, and then she'll stop that. So just open the gate and don't worry too much. Attracted by the good energy. So the second question I've got for us that are not chosen by distinguished beings like His Eminence, and for Westerners looking to join a Buddhist tradition, of course, there are just so many. There's all the different, Thai Buddhism and Zen Buddhism, and Tibetan Buddhism, and then within Tibetan Buddhism, there's many, many sects. And we're talking. There's so many different Buddhist traditions. My question is, if we go to a group, what are the fundamental Buddhist principles that should be very obvious to us to know that they're built on a good foundation? I mean, we've talked about bodhicitta and the 4 seals of Dharma and things like that. If a new student was to go into a Buddhist center, what should they be listening for in the teachings? Because some Buddhist centers, there's a lot of cultural input and a lot of material that is additional, which is fine, which is beautiful. But if there needs to be those foundations there, what should we be listening for when we go to a new group?
Well, the question isn't so much what you should be listening to, what is being offered. The problem most of the time is all the Buddhist centers are ethnically based Asian cultural background. And that's because Buddhism has been spread and has been an integral part of those cultures. And so most of them, with the exception of maybe few centers, all of them are Asian community run centers, be they Chinese Mayana, Theravadins, Burmese, Sri Lankan, whatever. They will mainly do the very cultural Buddhist things. It's most of the time, it's festivals, offering dana to the monks. The fact that they can do that, it's a great thing. And then the monks may do some prayers, some festivals, chanting, and most of them are not attending to learn Buddhism, nor are they running classes to teach Buddhism. They're simply maintaining their cultural tradition of what a child, when a child is born, or whether it's full moon, or whether it's a Vesak, or whatever their Buddhist calendar dictates and that community organizes. So therefore, you and I wouldn't have a much choice. I'm going to listen, I do that course. They hardly offer any courses. They just go to a festival, food fair. It's usually all the Buddhist groups are struggling to build a temple, and they're all doing food fairs. And then if they run the food fair well for a good 10, 15 years, they might have a temple. So they aren't offering any teachings. Only few centers that have English-speaking teachers. They also are mainly teaching once a week, and that's it. They don't really teach courses. So I don't think there is much to choose from. But those centers which have been established maybe good 30, 20 over years, who has some teachers who have good understanding of Dharma, then they might offer classes that are universally applicable. Even then, in all the Tibetan traditions and the Theravadan tradition, they always do what they've been taught. They never think of the demand. They think of what they should teach rather than what's requested. So we are really far away of finding courses that are taught just for what we want to listen to. Most people are seeking meditation. They really want to learn the meditation. So when I first come to know about a demand of people interested in Dharma and meditation and interested in culture, I decided to teach karma abiding. So we've been teaching karma abiding 8 weeks, and there's not a lot of ritual there. We don't even do the prayer we did, which when we do the 8-week courses. Why? Because most people aren't used to Buddhist culture. If they come to this center and they may see me bow down 3 times, take a seat, and even that they find it with, oh, there's so many things, and the left and the right and the back and the top hangings, and so most people just pretty much overwhelmed by the paraphernalia that is there, and whether the teaching is clear or not, that would be anybody's guess. So we've been doing karma abiding, and without any persuasion to people follow Buddhism. And all our students largely came from that. And it has worked. It has worked because it has recruited all the members through that. It has recruited all the students coming to the retreats. And then if people wanted to then take steps to become a Dharma student formally, become a Buddhist, then we offer them. But still, in terms of, we haven't put a lot of effort to put a special course for beginners. We haven't tried to do that. It's just, we don't know who's beginner, because a lot of people who come through the doors are not beginners. They're competent. They have read a lot. You went to university. They're professionals. They're not interested in a big, heavy load of academic Buddhist study. I know that. But at the same time, they want sane teachings of Dharma. So I haven't really, I think Buddhism in the West is still very, very infant stage. So we have to offer meditations, but if we do, we should just stick one system, if that works. If you do that, then you might actually have a systematized where people know, oh, that's how we do. So if it's based on meditation, then at least you can introduce 4 foundation mindfulness. And then you can, every now and then, you can slowly offer the 4 seals of Dharma and things like that, which the teachings comes through. So therefore, people should practice and experience that they're changing something in their lives by the teaching through the meditation. Then they know any Dharma is medicine. There isn't anything. Some people start with Kala Chakra empowerment. But like late Pra Kantipalo, he told me that he was Theravada monk for a long time, but he took green Tara initiation in Kalimpong in the 60s. And then in the late 90s, he became a Tibetan Buddhist. He says, definitely that initiation did something for him. So people take empowerments, but sometimes that's the exactly good connection. So therefore, there is no sort of facilitated courses. People start these, finish these, like the monastic curriculum has. Yeah.
So that actually interestingly leads to the next question. Because Buddhism is young in the West, and we get a lot of educated people that are coming to understand, what the theory is. And then there's other people who just want to do the meditation. I think, there's a scholarly component and a practitioner component, and it's good to have a balance, And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are, is where is that balance in the West? Have we got too much scholarly people just doing the study and not practice, or vice versa, or where do you think that balance is?
Yeah, there is no balance, unfortunately, even in traditional Buddhist context. Those monastics who are studying becoming scholars, they're all buried in their books. They don't even come to practice. And they're still very, very enticed to study more. And whereas others who are practicing, they don't want to study, because if they want to study, they may teach others, but they will not gain realization. And most of the yogis and realized beings are those who actually spend time in retreat, in solitude, not in teaching in big universities. They may write 40 books, but haven't realized, cause any student to realize, because they never spend doing retreat. So even in the West, you can see many people got PhD in Buddhism, and they're totally academic, dry academic, like, and when it comes to practice, they haven't done any of the practice. They used to do one or two, and then their interest has gone from what is to that, and they're not doing practice at all. But they know the theory very well. So the listening component with what we call Sutra component, which is listening, but thinking and practicing lacks. But those people who are influenced by forest tradition, where the teachers take them to meditate, sit with them, and spend months doing retreat with them, they have produced few practitioners that can actually teach the meditation very well in the West. But you have seen even some leading Western Buddhist teachers are largely those who have done the forest traditions. And they manage to lead retreats. They're willing to sit with students, lead retreat. While the others who have become academics, they're mainly comfortable with tenure with the university. They don't want to sit even half an hour with a fellow practitioner.
I guess
So the gap between the scholar and practitioner is as big as you can imagine.
But was that always the case? Even in Tibet, there'd be a big gap, and then there'd be the people in the retreats. So
That's some of the Buddhist Tibetan schools are all become different schools based on that. You know, and the Sakya and Gelug in particular, very scholastic tradition. They spend 10, 25 years studying. I don't know when will they meditate. I'm not saying they don't, but Nyingma and Kagyu, they focus more on the practice. They will put them in the 3-year retreat as early as they're possibly accepted. You know? And they have produced some of the greatest realized beings. Milarepa, he says, I have never heard of Durva Vinaya, but if I can tend my mind, that is my Vinaya. So saying, he spent all these years, and he's the most highly revered Tibetan Buddhist practitioner. Why? Because he did not go to scholastic schools. He just practiced. And so we nowadays do talk about the lack of balance, because people who become geishas and khenpos or lopans, and they become instantly teachers. You know, if they become good teachers, they might become really good teachers, have lots to. But do they themselves have time to go to retreat? You never see them going to retreat. Hence, they can't do many things, like they can't give empowerments because they haven't done any retreats. So they can only teach the academic Buddhism. But those who are realized beings, they often are not visible in because they're busy doing retreat. Occasionally, they might come out. I know one practitioner who's been doing retreat nearly now 25 years. When I invite him to come to West, he says, no, I have no time. Yeah. But if you go near the forest mountain yourself and do a semi-retreat and hassle them, then you'll get some instructions. So there is that kind of some Kagyu monasteries, I know they finished the Shedra and then they made for Drupra. Drupra is the 3-year retreat. So that's the ideal one. You study a number of years, then go to meditation retreat. So actually, the system in, I must say, the Kagyu and Nyingma side is probably a lot more balanced. And I'm not saying because Gelugpas are not balanced, but they have more people studying all the time. I don't know whether they have any actually established retreat place at all. You know, if there is still, you know, what are they teaching? You know, what are they doing? You know, do they have actual established form of the 3-year retreat? No, they don't.
Yeah, I guess it will always be the case, but let's hope that the retreat side also stays strong in the West and becomes a strong part as well. So then you have the choice to find teachers in.
Yeah, I noticed there are more Westerners called lamas. Why? Because they finished 3-year retreats. And quite a lot of them have become quite significant teachers because they did that. And whereas Gelugpa side of teachings, there are only few, not even half a dozen, maybe half a dozen who have finished geishas. You see what I mean? Whereas those who are lamas, Westerners who have studied Dharma a number of years, and then eventually did 3-year retreat, they actually have been given this title and status, and they're really running quite significant centers in Europe by those Western lamas. I saw 1 or 2 Gelupas. I don't think that I can call them ex-Gelupas, but they call themselves also lamas, even though they didn't do an actual 3-year retreat in any of the tradition, but because their knowledge is quite adequate, their practice might be quite good, and they're also calling themselves lama. So I don't know whether that was given properly or whether they did it. We don't know. But they don't have geisha degrees because they didn't do the geisha degrees. So a lot of the time, I do see the Westerners who have done many years of Dharma are lacking recognitions for their knowledge and education. So that shows how infant Buddhism is in Tibetan Buddhism. They don't want to appoint someone so easily, because when Tibetan groups try to, appoint someone as something, then they didn't realize he was not quite fit. So if they didn't have the right trainings, then you can't. But nevertheless, there are lots of people teaching. So the balance will happen, because eventually, if you don't have the meditation, no matter much conceptual understanding you have of Buddhism, it's still intellectual, theoretical. You don't have any realization.
Good. All right. Thank you. I've got some other questions from different people, Viola and Rosemary. One from Viola that's quite interesting is she was telling me about a personal retreat that she went on. And her question is about if we go on a personal retreat, whether it's a month or a year or whatever, how is that a benefit to the world? Because it seems like a very selfish, I guess, thing when you're just by yourself. How is that benefiting all number of beings?
That's a very good question. If your intent and motivation to do the retreat or do the study, do whatever Dharma work you're doing, if it's infused with the bodhicitta motivation, you have no doubt in your mind. You dedicate every hour, whatever you do for the benefit. But you don't have to, if you empty 1 bucket of water into the ocean, you don't say, did I waste that water? Did it go dry? You don't think like that, do you? Why? Because you know that until the ocean dries, your bucket of water wouldn't dry. So if you did anything, whether it's retreat or study or Dharma work or whatever, even like what we do now, if we did that with the benefit with the motivation for all sentient beings, then the benefit is inevitably there. You don't even have to see. You don't need to doubt of its benefit. It's traditionally, however, they say, if you want to benefit others, teach immediately. If you want to benefit others, immediately teach others. Doesn't mean you have to be some luminary teacher. You could be yourself as a student like me. But when you student teaching, and then you learn more. You learn more as in preparations. So it benefits you also more. Because you have to do the preparation, you have to do, and then also it benefits others, not just teaching, but also with the right intention and so on. Because some people do a lot, but doesn't benefit others. Other people do little, but it benefits us. Why? Not because what they do, but what they with the intentions. And then they say, if you want to benefit yourself, they say, do retreat. And so the more time you do spend retreat, and then when you look at that, that's only half true. All of those people who did retreat actually have become the most notable examples, like Milarev. He was, when people saw him, they thought he was a wasted life. He wasn't looking like benefiting anybody when they saw him. But look at now, after 900 years, his name is only second to the Buddha. Why? Because he spent most of the time in retreat. You see that? So therefore, the one doing retreat, if you have good realization like he has, and writings and teachings, and of course, so that's why the writing is good, because everything he said or sang was written down. So that we have 100,000 songs of Milarepa. They're all his teaching, his experiential songs. So we actually do not differentiate so much whether you benefit others or not by doing study or doing retreat. If you have the right intention, it eventually benefit. But Buddha himself sat under the Bodhi tree for the benefit of others. But he was complained for not looking after the family. So they at that time they felt it wasn't benefiting even the immediate family. And now after 6 years he went back and proved it all wrong. Then ever since that he hasn't stopped benefiting people. So intention of the practitioners, whether they are studying or meditating in retreat, is what really is important. That's why they say if your thought and intention is noble, then your paths and stages and effect would be beneficial and noble. So, but nevertheless, some people are much more effective speaker or teacher to others, so they could teach many. Others have status. Just having the title benefit people. And so a person with such a big titles hide in the mountains, immediately for the 30 years doesn't benefit many people. But if he or she spent out and giving lots of teaching, maybe lots of thousand people will reach the Dharma. So I don't think any effort goes astray, whether in retreat or in study, if one has the right intention. So when we talk of mindfulness, the practitioner, even though he's spending a lot of hours in meditation, if he's doing it with the intention of bodhicitta every session, checking one's motivation, not only checking the quantity of mantras or how good his health is going or not, but how good his intention is. Yes. So the more you can verify, test it, check your motivation, then you can see. But when we think of benefiting others, people think the more is better. If you really can ripen, mature one person in Dharma, it is enormous benefit. So the ripple effect will be quite palpable.
Yeah, and I like what you said about how teaching others can be the best form of being a student. And so the best way to learn is to teach, and that's my experience too. When I go to teach, I realize I know nothing about this subject, and I have to then relearn in order to teach. So,
yeah.
The next question comes from Rosemary. And she asks, it seems to me that in the West, we think that if we're going through difficulties, it's because we've done something wrong. So difficulties should be tried to be avoided. So can you say something about how difficulties can be the opportunity for change and growth?
Yeah, indeed. See, that this is what I was saying at the very beginning. Difficulties are dukkha. And dukkha is unsatisfactory things. And they are result of actions that were not quite clever or intelligent by ourselves and combination of others. We have lots of helpers to make difficulties. But we often think it's the helpers are the problem, that we have no hand in the difficulty ourselves. How did I get into this? I wish I never was a part of it. We straight away have the aversion and we desist from the difficulty. And that's a sign of us not understanding the truth of suffering. So if you see the truth of suffering, that the truth is that there is difficulties. The difficulties should not be complained if you are a practitioner. If you're turning the difficulties as an opportunity, you say, oh, this difficulty is a result of an unscrupulous action. And how do you now make a scrupulous decision to make a useful opportunity? And when you do that, that's when you practice patience. That's in the in the teaching, it says you have to accept this difficulty as nature of existence. And then after you see the difficulties, previously you not only face those difficulties, you naggingly complaining and talking about it and as incessantly, you never stop it because the difficulty has completely got you. And it never become opportunity. It's beaten you up. It has defeated you, and you are complaining and nagging about it. Subsequently, what they call post-traumatic stress disorders, because we resisted, we didn't accept the difficulties as nature of existence. But there is a time that you don't reject difficulty. See that as a nature of existence. See that as the truth of suffering. When you see the truth of suffering, then you know it is impermanent suffering. Even suffering is impermanent. And then that very suffering becomes cause of you generating compassion to likes of you and others who don't see this. But so people, it takes time for them to see the truth of suffering. Usually they negate, they deny, and they avoid, and they denounce, and they become totally dented by that. Then becomes suffering of suffering. But you can suffering of suffering. Then it's a perpetuate the suffering, but otherwise you can change the suffering to become cause of compassion, to realize impermanence, to make the suffering impermanent, because there is no suffering that's permanent. You can make the suffering impermanent, Why? By not feeling it. Because you know the cause of the suffering is your anger, or is your denial, or is your desire, or whatever. When you see that, you just dim them. You dim those things. You realize when the flame on the oven is too big, you dim your knob. Those knobs are there for a reason. Most people are not dimming the knob, but inflaming the knob. Yeah. Why? Because they don't know the workings of the oven. Like that, people who do not use the difficulties and opportunity, then they don't know the nature of the life. But those who know that, then the difficulties become opportunities, opportunities to purify past karmas and not create new negative karma for the future. So wise complain not about the past karma's result that are difficult now. It's the fools who complain. The wise choose their response because it will have another consequences. So reacting to difficulty escalate the difficulties. But acceptance of difficulties de-escalate the difficulties and make you strong and compassionate to the people and yourselves, and there you actually exhaust the karma. Because even sufferings are not real. They're not permanent.
That leaves me, I want to ask a bit of a personal question about the opposite. So when I started meditating, I really tried hard, and I would sit for 2 hours, 3 hours, despite the difficulties, and the more difficulties I would sort of push myself. And I would say almost I was masochistic in the way that I sat, sometimes in full lotus posture with pain and everything like that. And maybe it's because of getting older. I don't do that kind of pushing anymore. I choose a nice, comfortable place and I meditate just for as long as I feel more comfortable. And I feel that really the meditations with that more equanimity or something like that, the meditations are better. And I know that for some people, I feel it's almost a trap to push too hard at the beginning in practice, almost to the point where they're making difficulties where they don't need to be. So my question is, what is the role of having a pleasurable, enjoyable meditation at the beginning to help cultivate a liking for meditation versus people who want to really push too hard in meditation?
Well, I will call the 21st century meditation for pleasure.
But is there a balance?
So that will go well for them. But for actual meditation has to have some degree of masochistic approach, because you don't break any boundary, you don't cover any ground if you don't. You always say, "Oh, how was it? It's very lovely." But meditation doesn't begin to be quite lovely. Meditation begins when it's really difficult. So then you're about to really crack the nut. So most people don't want to push it hard enough. Why they talk about having 4 sessions a day, each session is a minimum 2.5 hours. So first 20 minutes, 30 minutes, everybody's comfortable. But once they start really difficult, and then that time they really will be able to burn some karmic calories as they really start to. Not necessarily making yourself suffer for the sake of suffering, but try to see how much of endurance and forbearance I have, like the Buddha who sat under the tree, and not just one morning, not just 2 mornings, winter, summer, dry, cold, wet, whatever the case might be. Not because it was easy, because the reason why he was doing was cause of the benefit of others. So if we have the motivation to forbear those hardships, that's where we actually overcome our neurosis, our irritability, our deficiency in patience and diligence. All are really tested. Of course, the masochistic way of doing is not the way, because some people will become cross and they never want to meditate. So your short meditation retreat definitely have to be tailored, so it's good for the aggregates, but people who really are seeking meditation, out of many, will be only few, who only want to feel good meditation. Buddhist meditation is not feel good meditation. It's actually harder the thing it is. The harder the place is, more basic, rustic and basic the facilities are, probably better for the practitioner, because that's what our Buddhas and yogis practice. In comfort, nobody realizes truth. In hardships, we will. And
I guess you start with your comfort zone, and then maybe you extend it as you get more faith and more, as you get more practice, you can extend the level.
But you can see there's a lot of meditations these days for people who are so stressed by their life's demands and they really want a meditation. For them, you definitely need to offer something that is not hard to their knees, or they have meditation retreat where everybody's lying down on the floor. Nobody's sitting up even half an hour. Everybody's lying down. And maybe someone is doing little rubbing on your feet or on the shoulders, and saying some mantras and putting some hot stones on your forehead.
Luxury.
Those things are not Buddhism.
No. We still got lots of questions. I wondered, did you want to check whether
there aren't any. If there are, I will see.
Great. So the next one is from Rosemary again. She asked, would you expand on the 4 immeasurables and how we can use them to not be overwhelmed? I guess it follows on from the one about the difficulties. How we can use the 4 immeasurables.
Yeah, well, 4 immeasurables. Firstly, immeasurable loving kindness, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable joyfulness, immeasurable equanimity. They themselves has to be practiced in that order. All the Buddhist teachings are taught in an order of number of things. They mustn't be changed the order. They have to be kept in the order. So first one has to practice infinite loving kindness, and then compassion, joyfulness, equanimity. We become overwhelmed sometimes because we don't realize the developing of loving kindness can be fused with attachment. So those towards whom we try to increase the love, we are not increasing, we are not doing infinite loving kindness. We are doing finite loving kindness with finite beings, and then become very, very overwhelming. So when your object of loving kindness as immeasurable is immeasurable, so there is no finite object that are chosen by you because you have attachment to them or you have long-term aversion to them, but now you're loving them. Those could be very overwhelming because you are using finite object. So therefore, immeasurable meditation shouldn't be tried with finite object. But in the general loving kindness meditation, they say, may I be well, may he be well, may she be. Those sort of things are very finite object. And that could be quite overwhelming, because when you do overwhelming emotionally, so much so that you don't know how to cope with it. So that's why in Mahayana, this four immeasurable must always do with the refuge first. Mm-hmm. And after you take refuge, then you take the immeasurable loving kindness meditation as blessings of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. You're just a medium through which you're passing through. So you're not necessarily trying to radiate love because you're so perfect to distribute towards all sentient beings. We are yet to learn to get to that ourselves, trying to. So that's why when we practice generosity, we don't practice as Peter or me. We practice as a generosity so that we don't get overwhelmed. So that we do not become the finite person who loves all these beings, beautiful people, then we become very overwhelmed. That's why Vajrayana model of transmuting your identity into the role of Avalokitesvara, and then send infinite loving kindness and infinite compassion and joyfulness, equanimity to all beings without any kind of near and far and neutral difference, but all beings are unrecognized mother sentient beings. So then there is no, it's still you can get a bit overwhelmed sometimes, but the reason is because you're meditating yourself as Peter and trying to do loving kindness. Then you will be emotional. That's why it is important to learn about four immeasurables. But when you learn the four immeasurables, you make there are 4 tools or 6 tools with which you first make a determination to practice loving kindness to all sentient beings. Mm-hmm. And then you make a pledge that you will always practice loving kindness before anything else. And then you supplicate to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas so that you're actually praying to the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas inspiration that you do practice loving kindness as the first call to sentient beings. Mm-hmm. And the fourth is you dedicate every day, smallest things you see, maybe a very nice walk like we had, and then even then you dedicate so that we do generate loving kindness. Mm-hmm. So if you make the habit of that outside kind of formal meditations, then you are trying to make a really small drops of snippets of what immeasurable loving kindness will, but still, we still don't have a meditation to transcend the I and me and mine. Because of that, we will be all emotional. Mm. So that's why those people who are initiated in Vajrayana sadhana practice, like doing Avalokitesvara, it's an excellent way to do this refuge and four immeasurable at the very beginning, and then do the dissolution of your identity into emptiness, and then manifest your emptiness of self in the form of deified Avalokitesvara. And then therefore, so you as a Avalokitesvara is a medium of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas' infinite loving kindness. Then you are radiating through that. If you do that, there's a little kind of way to not get in the way of the practice by being me, the practitioner who get too emotional. Mm. But to do that, you have to have good understanding of the emptiness of self and the danger of us being the center stage of being me, who's feeling this for him, who's this to me. Oh, he was so good, but our situation soured so bad, and now I don't feel good. Right now, we feel like we're compensating that by generating immense compassion to them. You become very emotional. Why? Because you are bringing the old stories of self and other as raw as they were. They haven't been nullified by the meditation on emptiness, where maybe it didn't exist. So that's why the deity yogas have been put in place for these very purposes.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And it sort of, if you can see yourself available Kitisvara, then it's a much purer and much purer loving kindness, because it's not caught up with all the stories. Just quickly on that, when you say do them in order, do you recommend sort of maybe doing a whole month on loving kindness and a month on karuna and then mudita, or all within one meditation, or one and then the other and then the other?
Yeah, no, I think that when we do bodhicitta retreat, basically we do the for immeasurables, but the wording might be different, but you have to put all those sentiments. But when you do that as inside the very, very facilitated form of retreat, if you have a couple of months, you can actually do all of them in each session as a frame, but focus on one until you get. And then same, you do the focus on all of them, but so do all of the four, but focus on that until you have significant loving kindness. Because if you really develop loving kindness, then you will develop compassion. Because the more you love someone, that much more you know his or her suffering. Because other suffering we don't even feel, because we don't know. Why? Because we don't have that loving feeling towards them. So the more loving you have, loving kindness, infinite loving kindness, you are much more fit to develop the compassion. So ideally, that would be good to do the form meditation or form in that gradation. But each of the sessions should still have all the three just as a short. Like say if you do 7-limb prayer, you want to 7-limb prayer. When the 7-limb prayer is, I would say, elongated, it becomes all the Tibetan preliminary practices. When all the preliminary practices are collapsed, there are 7-limb prayers. 7-limb prayers is only 12 verses. But if you look at it, the first 5 verses are all prostration and homage, and then making offerings, a half a dozen, and then confession is just 1 verse. So, but you don't do just one and not do the other 6. You still do all 7 limbs. Like that, you can do all 4 immeasurable prayers, but you focus say if you're doing really good meditation just on that, you focus on that. Of course, the 4 immeasurable meditation is meditation on bodhicitta, the retreat. Bodhicitta retreat is 4 immeasurable.
Yeah, for sure. Great, thank you. That was useful. That was very clear. Okay. Another one from we've got time for one more. One more. We've got a bonus question here. The last one then is from Viola. She asks that there's a lot of fear in the world today. There's problems with warfare in Europe, there's climate destruction. Every day there's terrible headlines coming out about, fires and things like that. So she asked, what is the cause of the fear and why do we seem to keep feeding it?
Good question and very easy answer. The Tibetan word for the world is fear-based existence. Jiktenpa. And all of this industry exists because there's fear. When you carry an umbrella, put on a rain jacket, when you go out, it's all fear. But everything we have is because we fear we get wet, we take care of an umbrella. Because we fear that it would get dark, we take a torch. So nowadays, we think there's more disasters. Actually, it's not true. Nowadays, we know it instantly. Whatever happened, everybody knows it. In the old days, there were a lot more murders, a lot more disasters, a lot more invasions. when the world was not civilized. But half the world never even knew it was happening. Why? There was no price waters. There was no Rupert Murdoch. There were no Channel 9. There were no Sky Television. No BBC. Now we have BBC, CNN, and ABC. They will tell even things that hasn't happened for the sake of themselves getting more people to read their stories. Even if they're telling a valid story, if you look at the Googles, they'll give you a headline and then they wouldn't tell you to read the rest. They say you have to pay for them. So all these headlines are commercial drives. They're driven by desire. And so our fear of all of these things is because we desire to have no problem. But yet we have created all its causes. We have created so causes we don't want to have any effect. And so it's like so the war, even the war these days, in the 21st century war between Russia and Ukraine seems like a completely uncalled for world. Is a lot more civilized. It really have many different ways of resolving conflict, and so most of those civilized countries are actually resolving many disputes by diplomatic and channel. And so in the old days, they never tried diplomatic. There was no. They just fired each other. They just destroyed each other. So actually, our world is not really that bad because technology is really very advanced. We know so much instantly within a few minutes. Whatever happens, we know. But there are lots of places, countries where people still don't know what's happening. So best is we don't consume ourselves to this negative news. We know deep down samsara is always unsatisfactory. So it's no shock, it's no surprise these things happen. But we never hear the good news. We never hear the good news. You never hear the good news.
No good news channel.
There's no good news channel. They don't want to tell the good news because there are too many. And there are too many. I think we have to think the world has a lot more good things than they're now reporting. Somebody who has helped somebody all these years, send $30 every month to the World Vision or child, whatever, to the organization, how they helped many families in Africa and Asia. They've been doing that 20 years, and now the kid actually finished high school. They don't tell any story, but they're happening. There are hundreds of thousands of Australians doing that. They don't tell these stories. There are lots of good stories to tell. We have good reason to think they are more good than bad because everybody long wish to do good. Everybody gets a morning, what can I do today as in service of the world? People have that. So I think the world has become much better than we are thinking. Climate change. I mean, by definition, it's changing all the time. Morning to afternoon, all the time changing. No matter, even before they brought the word climate change, the morning is cold, afternoon is warm, evening is cold. They never say we have climate change. They have unusual. This year so hot because you forgot that 20 years before. I think we're dramatizing these things a bit too much to the extent that the world is going a very hard time.
Well, we can also hope that it inspires people. I mean, we were talking that in Ukraine, there's more people seeking Buddhism and things like that because of the difficulties. So, the difficulties, sometimes they inspire the good of people.
Yeah. I mean, Prince Siddhartha was motivated to do something about his life in the world when he knew that his old age, sickness, and death was inevitable. And what else can go wrong? The rest of the, your tire get punctured or, there's no power outage. and there's a flood down the road. These are not regarded as a death. If they are terrible, because some person might be drowned by the water. All this sickness, death, this has been there all along, and that's was the main motivation for the Prince Siddhartha saying, "No, I'm going to do something about it." Not that he was able to stop that, but at least he was able to alert everybody that this is, by the way, universal nature of existence. So do not, overreact when you experience aging or sickness, or someone in your life suffers death or is aging. You should not react to it as a unprecedented thing. This is the nature of existence, and then we are much more calm in accepting death as not the end of the life, but a transition of another. Everybody celebrates birth, so we can pre-celebrate the birth of one who has just died. So with this we will conclude, everybody. Thank you very much, everybody, for those questions. Thank you, Peter, having me and your family. Viola driving me all this, so now thank you, everybody, joining us. Now that we don't have to always physically present, but we can see each other like this. And I'm heading up to Adelaide this afternoon to do a Avalokiteshvara practice. So we will think of all of you. Thank you very much. With this, we do the dedication of merits. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rinpoche. Thank you.